what we're going to do is that we're going to have a nice interaction. Francisco, I don't know if you can share, you can start the Facebook Live from your end.
I really don't know how to do it. I'm recording right now, but I'm not sure how
That's
to
fine.
do it.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Live on Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. So so for if you want to review this later, we're gonna put it on Facebook Live hopefully today, like we've done in the past. We have also our C Flag YouTube channel where we have some other materials. That's where permanently these lectures are going to reside. Again, if we're bouncing ideas through the chat box, we're working with you. So we're not just providing another lecture. Hopefully, we can get to network with each other and bounce ideas on how things are done throughout creation. Because we have people not just from Florida, we have people joining us from other parts of the world, and that makes this conference even cooler. Okay, can you advance the slide, Francisco?
I mean, I'm working with the Facebook Live right now.
Yeah.
So
give us a second, and thanks for your patience. This is not the usual. My team, we are heavily invested in providing you with this future lectures, and this lecture actually is stemming from the same direction. Everything that we do, we measure. Everything that we do, we have an evaluation for programs where we can catch the effectiveness of our delivery methods. Basically, this program was meant to be on a live program with demonstrations, etc. But because of the COVID-19 situation, we are not able to have it, and other people from other parts of the world are benefiting from that, and that's perfect. So at the end of the program, I want you to fill out that program evaluation if you have done it in previous sessions, and you feel like there's something else that you can contribute with in terms of program ideas or opinions, or you want to rate how this program went today. You can go in there and you can give us your information. That way, we're going to have the opportunity to build the next year's class, and hopefully it's going to be on Zoom as well, because I kind of like this thing, unless my internet goes down. Anyway, so there's your link. You're going to have it in the chat box. You're going to have it in the Facebook recording as well. So you can contribute with your opinion. All right, please advance the next slide.
We are on Facebook.
I think that okay, yeah, we're live on Facebook now. So maybe my internet is never mind, man. So on session 1, which is recorded and available on Facebook, we talked about just the foundation of what we have to do to move from being a hobbyist to a commercial producer. Then Francisco talked on niche marketing and social media. The next session, that was yesterday, we had a really good conversation on conservation practices for small ruminant operations and sire selection. What to look for. Laura did a wonderful job. I encourage you to go in there and look at those recordings if you did not have the chance to join us yesterday. Francisco was the one that did the conservation practices. I didn't watch the conservation practices, but they tell me that it was good as well. I don't doubt it. So today we're going to talk about animal welfare and why we should. My goal is to convince you, start telling your story. My idea with this topic was to kind of get you in tune with what's happening around us. Florida, it's a pretty populous state. And in the U.S., we have some issues with social issues that make animal agriculture, uh, uh, a front and center situation for a lot of people, especially with COVID-19. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then Caitlin Bainham is going to talk about incorporating summer annuals into our pasture management program. So in Florida, we have a dry season and a humid season. We're semi-tropical. Uh, Apparently, we're back. So I'm going to try to join you from my computer. Um, Anyway, so Kaylin's going to talk about that and what we can plant during those winter months when in Florida we attempt to have a weather. Sorry for that. There we go. Oh, let me shut up.
Good idea.
Okay, I hopefully I'm back. I cannot hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jonah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you for the other thing that we have is that polling that we want to know how effective we are. So just we're gonna have that polling there for you guys to tell us how we're doing. Can you advance to the next one, Francisco? So tomorrow, yeah. So tomorrow we're gonna have our lecture with an invited speaker on artificial insemination and what we need to do to start working towards genetic progress through artificial insemination. Maybe something that you can incorporate uh, as you expand your goat operation or sheep operation. Let me see what I can do. All righty. So by the grace of God, we have internet. So I'm going to try to share my screen and get the show on the road, if that's okay with you guys. All right. Trial by fire. That's the name of the game for today. Let me see if I can do this again because it didn't work. Thank you again for your patience. And we'll get there in a second. I don't know what's wrong now. Okay, share screen. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. All right. So I'm gonna start off with the first topic. Sec. So again, let's go in there. My objectives today are gonna be discussing why we should proactively be telling our story. Identifying those animal welfare, trying to expand your mind on those animal welfare issues that are common. I was reading an article. I don't know if in the United States we have issues with people that don't understand animal agriculture and they want to stop animal agriculture, and that can be a challenge in your neighborhood. Um, and I remember this story about a steer named Oatmeal. I don't know if you remember that story. Uh, Oatmeal was a blind steer that went to the fair as an animal project for 4-H or FFA kid, and there was a big stink about Oatmeal and how anti-animal agriculture activists, they ended up making a fuss about Oatmeal not going to the slaughterhouse or harvesting facility. Then they ended up buying the steer. They found a farm for Oatmeal. and oatmeal actually went to live a normal life, apparently. Uh, as we fast forward, oatmeal was donated to a Texas A&M University, and it was a part of a clinical research trial on uh, his sight condition that he had because he was blind. There's nothing natural about the fate of oatmeal. Okay, but we have a story, and if people don't, if ranchers and farmers don't tell that story, somebody else will. So that's where uh, I want you guys to think about the situations, and you know, just uh, maybe we can get you to tell your story, because your story is so important to animal agriculture and to your livelihood. Maybe you don't have time for that, but maybe you can invest some time taking pictures of what you're doing with your animals to educate others. So let's go back to you know, to history. Okay, we are domesticating animals, and that's how humanity went from hunter gatherers to actually farmers, and establishing societal structures that make us now so diverse. We're communicating throughout the world through a computer, and that's awesome. That happened because we don't have to now. Everybody has their passion, and they can follow that passion. And only 2% of the world is actually the ones that are farming. Okay, we don't think about that, but animal agriculture actually helped us spend time developing our society, uh, and liberated us from having to expend calories in hunting and gathering. So that's a story that a lot of people ignore. They don't understand how important, how vital animal agriculture is to the environment. Let's talk about COVID-19. Stay at home orders reduced the traffic by more than 50%. What happened to air quality during that time was amazing. Okay, we went from totally polluted areas in China. Now people are actually breathing better, and that's just because of transportation. If that didn't happen, people would still believe, and some people still do, that cow farts or belches are the ones that are contaminating, contributing to the climate
2050.
change. Gary, you were saying something.
My bad.
Okay, I'm gonna mute you. Just use the chat box, and hopefully Francisco and Kaylin can monitor for questions. Anyway, so uh, now that we have domesticated this livestock that we call sheep and goats, now uh, areas that were not were hardly inhabitable, like the vast grasslands in Asia, or the Arctic tundra, or you know, places like that. Now we can inhabit them. Uh, Areas like you know, Wyoming and Montana have agriculture. If animal agriculture didn't exist, there would be hardly anything, any societies in those places. When we think about that, that's pretty awesome. We're providing jobs through processing plants, through service industries to those families that live there, and also, you know, farming and ranching. So agriculture and animal agriculture is very, very important. So how do we tell that story? How do you know, do you know, how does our mind process information? We have, I don't know if you remember those movies where they talk about the circle of trust, and you're in that tight circle, that family circle, that I don't know if you remember Meet the Parents. That's that movie with De Niro, where you're in that tight circle of trust where people directly in contact with you every day, those are the people that we trust the most. Okay, and we see our elders, our heads of households for our children. They are the utmost authority for information. Now, social media has shifted everything because now there's an influx of information that we don't know. A lot of us, we're not trained to disseminate or discern between what's real and what's not. But typically, this is how we work. Heads of households have the utmost authority over facts in our minds and our children's minds. Then we have the healers or the medical professionals or the animal scientists in this case. They are the subject matter area experts, and they're the ones that are doing all the research that now are coming up with all those recommendations that Francisco was talking about yesterday. And then we understand and we assume that the information that they're provided is science-based, is research-based, is measured. So we have a good, heavy confidence in what they're saying. Now, elders or politicians nowadays, those your mayor, you're going to talk about your senators. They were respected. Now, with scrutiny and with Freedom of Information Acts and stuff like that, now we understand that that trust is diminishing. Okay, so when we listen to politicians, we usually know that they're just trying to get elected. But some people still trust them. Give me a second. When the internet went out, I just started screaming like a little girl, and that's why my voice is kind of hoarse. Anyway, so in most of society, there's a social disconnect. Here in Florida, the average it's probably more than 3 generations of people that are disconnected from the food that they consume. And the latest number I could find is from 2011. 72% of Americans actually knew nothing about agriculture. So the vast majority of our clientele has no idea how their food is produced. Some good facts to share is the amount of family farms that are out there instead of the corporate farms and the factory farms and all those trendy words that we hear a lot. We have to just give them some facts and then some good information in terms of images for them to understand that we're the real deal. Okay, we are the people that is in the production lines, in the front lines of food production and fiber production. So we should be viewed as the authority. Nobody's more invested in agriculture than we are, in animal welfare than we are. So our role in this critical, in reconnecting people with agriculture is really important. So we have some detractors, okay? Some detractors from what we're doing. Some people that want to create policies that forbid us from owning an animal. And they throw this concept that an animal is a person. And they are attributing a certain human character to the food we eat. And so I wanted you to be clear on this definition. What is a person? It's a human or an individual. One such as a human being, a partnership or a corporation, okay? That is recognized by law as the subject of rights and duties. And we do have animal rights. We do not tolerate animal abuse. We talk about humane treatment of animals, and we promote humane treatment of animals. We do not promote humanization of animals because they're not humans. They are not the same species as we are. They don't have the same needs. So that needs to be very clear. Uh, this cool picture of this therapy dogs in love. They how real is that? Are they are they really in love, or they're just spending too much time and they just created a social bond? Did they actually need a wedding cake or top hat? Did the poor dog choose the wedding gown? So those are some of the questions for you to see how we have transformed uh, the animal rights or animal welfare into a human problem. Okay, so the term humane is defined as is marked by compassion, sympathy, consideration for humans or animals. That's what humane means, and that's why science has been collected, data has been collected on how stress can actually reduce the well-being of an animal. Uh, Stress can cause inflammation, can cause loss of production. That's why we trim hooves. That's why we give a special feed. That's why we have to doctor our animals. So we are actually employing humane practices. Um, but humane is not the same thing as humanization. I saw a Facebook post of a lady with a duckling, and apparently that lady was sleeping with this duckling, and the duckling was pooping on her shirt. If the duckling was in his cage, that wouldn't happen. But we want to treat it like a puppy. We want to treat it like a child, and so we have that disconnect. So there's this lack of knowledge and attribution uh, of rights that are not needed to our livestock, and that's a great opportunity. That's the way I see it. That's an interesting opportunity for us to engage in meaningful conversations with facts and with good images. People can actually understand animal agriculture to some degree. Okay, and those are opportunities for you to market your farm, to market what you're doing, because you have collected evidence that you actually care for your animals, and that puts in perspective this war, unfair war that we are waging with people that are actually in these movements, not to save animals, just to get donations from those people that open their hearts and minds to these weird ideas because they don't know any better. So we're on this post-truth era, and fake news, alternative facts, and all these buzzwords are common. And I hate this because I'm a scientist. I'm a trained scientist, and I'm trained to look at the data. Um, and it's very difficult for a trained scientist to uh, uh, not flip out when somebody shares something that is not science-based with the best of intentions, and then they go and defend their point. Okay, and for me, that I spent, I don't know how many hours on my animal reproduction class, I kind of know more about artificial insemination than the computer uh, guy that has a nice camera like the one that I have right now, and didn't go to school for that. So let me show you what we're dealing against. and I'll tell you the backstory on this thing. Hope you can read between the lines.
Florida's toxic algae blooms have been the bane of residents and tourists alike. The blooms have been so bad in recent years, politicians have promised to do something.
You can count on me to stand for clean water, stop the toxic algae.
But how? The toxic green goo is fueled by phosphorus. Officials say that in the Lake Okeechobee Basin, most of it comes from agricultural runoff, an unpleasant mixture of water, fertilizer, and pesticides. Farmers on the south side of the lake are controlling the phosphorus, but it's costly, and ranchers on the north side of the lake are resistant. So it flows into the lake, then snakes its way through rivers and canals all the way to the coasts. If you want to stop the blooms, you stop the runoff. But that's no easy feat when you're facing a well-heeled agricultural lobby.
Most of the family farms, they don't send anybody to Tallahassee. They don't get involved in the lobbies. They just think it's not going to affect them until they wake up and there's regulation.
You ain't get any more well done than that. Lord help you.
Each year, the powerful Florida Cattlemen's Association wines and dines lawmakers at the state capitol with its Boots on the Hill barbecue. And this year, everyone seemed to like what was on the menu, the Clean Waterways Act of 2020. The bill was designed to do something about the toxic algae problem, but it does little to address runoff.
So, could you hear that all right? So, we have our, I'm part of the Florida Cattlemen's Association. I was there on Boots on the Hill, and there's nothing wrong with a grassroots organization actually lobbying for what they believe is right. All of this thing is taken out of context because of regional issues in terms of Lake Okeechobee, which is basically the central point of controversy for a long time. But what they don't talk about in this is the Weather Channel reporters, that the headwaters of Lake Okeechobee are actually that basin is the Kissimmee River that drains everything that's in the Orlando metro area, home to millions of people. Okay, so all of that toxic algae is fueled by runoff from fertilizer and agrochemicals from the north, like they were saying, north of the lake, but actually northerners, way far north than what they were saying. Anyway, so it's a big deal, and if we are not actively having a good conversation with other people, with our elected officials, we're gonna have a big problem when it comes time to make policy. Okay, so the fear factor is what moves a lot of this debate over animal agriculture. Fear is defined as an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or threat. Nothing scares me more than an uncertain future. Nothing scares me more than global warming, climate change, polluted waterways, etc. Because I care about my environment, and you probably do the same. But if we are not addressing our fears of speaking out, we're going to be chopped. And regulation is being created to over-regulate you. There's another quote here that says, "Fear is what created the monster in the room." And in the other, in order, to overcome the many problems and enslavements that we have today, it's not about getting rid of the monster, but about getting rid of fear. You have the ability through Zoom to raise your hand. How many of you were trained public speakers? Raise your hand if you can. And probably none of you, or not many of you, actually were trained public speakers. So we are fearful. We don't know how to use social media. We don't understand how to impact others. But your everyday dealings, if we capture them right, they're going to be a part of this puzzle for people to understand how animal agriculture actually behaves. So what do you see there? It's just a fainting goat. But when other people see that, they think you shot the poor animal, and the buzzards are about to get rid of it. But it's just a fainting goat, okay? Same thing here. Sheep shearing has been portrayed as animal abuse when we're actually providing relief in the summer months to those animals. Is it inhumane? It is not. We're actually helping and actually selling that wool to provide the right environment for those animals. What do you see there? It's a goat stand, but people don't know it. They think it's just a contraption to cause pain to those animals. So those are opportunities that we do have to educate other people. So we are supposed to be portrayed as the ultimate animal activist, okay? Our job is to demonstrate, aside from producing, from medicating, from fixing fence and all this stuff, as an organization of people that think alike, we have to come up with a strategy to be portrayed as the ultimate animal activist in behalf, or that provide benefit in a nice environment for those animals to thrive. There's ironically, the state senator from Wyoming, Bradley Enzi, he was the one that came up with the term, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. So if we don't organize, if we don't share our story, if we don't explain to others why we have to use dewormer sometimes, why we have to trim hooves, why we're milking animals, why we're using artificial insemination, if we're not proactively training others, exposing others, we're going to be on the menu soon. Okay? And that is a big problem and that you should be concerned with. This is something that came up recently. It's a site that, at least in the US, they have created, one of these activist groups, they have created this site to map out areas where people can look for animal abuse situations. And I have to do the quotes because animal abuse is not the same thing for everybody. Police, trained police deputies that work with animal abuse and crimes, they understand what animal abuse looks like. But a horse laying down in the middle of the field in daytime is not animal abuse. Still, we get a lot of phone calls from people saying that there's a dead horse on a field somewhere and he was just taking a nap. So a big problem. So they have, through the Freedom of Information Act, they have mapped out these areas of concern, and maybe your farm or ranch is there in this map. So the website is called Operation Counterglow. And this is where I'm located, actually, here. Here by the fairgrounds in Hardy County, Florida. Okay, the fairgrounds are one of those areas of concern where somebody can go there during fair time and report animal abuse or organize some type of show to, you know, get sympathizers and cause trouble. But if the community understands who you are and how good you're taking care of your animals, you're ahead of the game. Okay, because you have tangible evidence that you're a good person, that you know what you're doing. So COVID-19 has put in evidence all of these cracks in the food system. My sister lives in Houston, Texas, or Pearland, which is south of Houston. And when COVID-19 hit, we saw those pictures and news releases of farmers actually plowing their fields because they didn't have outlets for that food. And some food banks ran out of food. And she was asking me why we have that issue. That food was actually going to restaurants. It was not going to food banks or grocery chains. So we have plenty of food for the supermarket, for the grocery store chains, but there was a lot of people that went to bed hungry during, you know, the first weeks of this situation in the United States, because our system is not perfect. And I don't know a perfect system, or I don't know how to fix it, but it exposed this issues that are very important to everybody. Nobody messes with the food that I have for my kids. So that's the problem. We have somebody unmuted, please. So what can we do to protect our livelihood? Let's start by investing in our perception, fixing those fences, starting a Facebook page, you know, with good quality pictures and a story behind it. Be proactive in telling that story. This is why we do this. We take care of these animals this way, that way, or the other. We had a visit of the vet today, and everything's fine. And this is the health papers on Lulu that was sick or whatever. I don't know. You know about that better than I do. Bridge that gap. Understand that challenges are going to happen, but those are opportunities for you to bridge that gap with somebody that does not understand how agriculture works. In Florida, we used to have several groups. We had a meat goat association that went away. I would love to see something of an association coming out of one of these meetings. So we need to join forces with one another, network with one another, bring some structure, because that's the only way that we can have a seat at the table and not on the menu. So I like this quote. It goes, I'm going to read it. Remember that you are a teacher. You are helping people, making them feel safer, taking them from fear to love, from ignorance to knowledge. So if I inspired you to start posting, just let us know, because we want to know that there's something that came out of this. But people are innately ignorant, and they will fill in the gaps of their knowledge. And we sometimes help them by not explaining what's happening. Okay, so just think about you guys as being teachers, because everybody in your neighborhood around you, they're looking at what's happening in your farm. So that's why Francisco was talking about social media. That's why Meg was talking about business planning, because the end goal is to be proactive. The end goal is for you to survive and to actually make money if possible. You don't get there by chance. So we have to be proactive. Look at this, guys. They have, let me see if I can. they have they had a live feed on that farm. So when the goats were kidding, people were looking at the goats in real time, and they had thousands and thousands and thousands of comments from people just looking at the goats eating and kidding. And that's an evidence to the to that neighborhood, to those people that are watching, that our you know, the folks in this farm were actually taking care of those animals. That looks better than my living room or my bedroom right now, because I got two little kids. So use social media carefully. Limit those views or those chances where people can assume that you're, you know, or that can fill in the blanks. Provide context to those Facebook posts, so those Twitter posts. So we're educating, we're building our reputation. That's the only way that I can tell you that we will have a seat at the table when it comes to decision making. Um, engaging in education is everything now. Everybody wants to learn more about food and farming, because they understood that, you know, any day another pandemic can come, or a war or whatever, and they're now going to have to fend for themselves. So this is the perfect time to start educating other people. Um, Start focusing on those practices that we have invested time and science, you know, just fleshing out the use of the warmers, why we use livestock guardian dogs, why we trim hooves, etc. So the authority on trust. So this is how people think, okay? They look for expertise, but before they look for expertise, they look for somebody that looks like that has that picture that I feel comfortable with. And when that person starts talking, that he or she inspires uh, trust. Okay, so these are some of those three areas that we have to invest time uh, learning: science. Why do we feed alfalfa cubes? Um, why do we uh, uh, muck our stalls? Why do we do this, that, and the other? Why do we kid? Uh, you know, why do we have to, uh, you know, give shots to animals, etc. Okay, so immerse yourself in those practices that you're employing, sorry, in your farm. Um, So a question that got asked was association pages or grassroots association organization pages. I suggest that you become a member of your local farm bureau chapter. That would be one of those organizations that is important. Um, breed associations are very important as well. Uh, we have you know, national those breed association and those and actually farm bureau and other organizations such as those are there to help us carry that message and representation in local governments. Okay, anyway, so immerse yourself in these three areas: trustworthiness, look like a reliable person, not a crazy person, um, outside of your farm. Okay, try to be honest. Nobody enjoys a good conversation better than an honest conversation. Uh, if somebody has something to say about you, let it be good. Okay, cheating uh, uh, is not allowed when it comes to building trust. Okay, uh, dress professionally when you're talking, when you're talking to somebody else, when you're going to address the public, when you are in a farmer's market or something. So have a uniform, or have a logo. Invest in your appearance. Talk about ecological services that your animals are providing, that green space for wildlife to thrive, that water recharge. When rainwater falls in concrete, it doesn't pour as quickly as it does, or percolate as quickly, and it usually carries something with it. But green space, plants providing oxygenation for the rest of creation, for humanity. Those are messages that resonate with people. Um, I like this clip from. Let me play it for you. This is a solar farm that it's really close to here. But what they're doing is that they have, instead of using chemical weed control, they're managing part of their weeds with actual sheep. Okay, 700 acres of solar panels. You know how much chemical they're saving, and that resonates with their clients. Their clients are going to be happier to pay that higher power bill, because now they're seeing that their power authority is not contaminating the water. It's not doing some sketchy things. So now we have evidence there, and people respond to that. So aside from your business plan, think about marketing. How are we marketing our product? Um, I remember I had a farmer, a beginning farmer, and we started discussing some of these ideas on have a farm story. And he developed this farm story. He developed a logo or a cartoon where his farm's name was Farming for You. So he had a cartoon of his family, and some cards that he gave out at farmers markets, and people loved it. So that's a way. That's a marketing plan. He started a Facebook page. He started his website. Um, you don't have to go that far if you don't want to, but just think about how you're gonna market those animals when or before they hit the ground. Have them sold before they hit the ground. If you go out of business, then I'm not gonna have anything else to do. Okay, so that's why I'm trying to push you to survive, to thrive, and to expand. But do it in an educated manner. We're not living in isolation anymore, because everybody's got a phone, everybody's got social media, and everybody wants to know what's happening in your farm when they go out for ice cream, and go through your place. They want to know what's happening, and this is an opportunity to be present in that conversation. So Ronald Reagan said, peace is not an absence of conflict, it's the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. So no shotguns if possible. In that conversation, a lot of good stuff comes from challenge, and we have to challenge ourselves in telling our story. This is my last slide, I promise. We are here to help. We're here to provide you with the tools that you need, in animal husbandry, in pasture management, in soil science, in plant identification, you name it. The university extension system, that's what we do. That's our goal, is to make you make positive change in your community. So that's why you pay taxes, and those taxes go through our salaries, because that's the way that we advance community change. So be intentional in what you do. Don't just use this phone to play Angry Birds or whatever you're playing these days. Use it as a marketing tool. Be factual. Share information that's actual and true. Be neutral. When there's a conflict, try to either maneuver away from it with some good information. Be prepared for that, and also be as courteous as you can. Um, anyway, so that's what I have. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I talk too much and I get inspired by this topic. So if you have any questions for me, I'll gladly answer them. And thanks for bearing with me, by the way, with my internet hiccup.
Somebody have any questions?
Maybe they just fell asleep like Joe Walter did yesterday.
Oh, wow, don't say that. We are live.
We got pictures.
Wow. Oh, well, it's a good comment. There is somebody that have 20 cracker cutter with solar panel. They have solar panel with cracker cutter.
Okay, I see that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. So I think that we are done with the question session. Great presentation, Jonah.
Thank you, thank you. So next on the program, we're gonna have Caitlin Bainham. She is our counterpart in Marion County. She's gonna be. Are you prepared, lady?
Always.
Jonah, excuse me, I'm sorry. We have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you recommend handling if extreme animal rights activists attack your page?
Perfect. Thing to do would be to block them. That would be the first thing. If it gets out of hand, you can actually file a formal complaint against people. I was in a meeting yesterday with a sheriff from a county near here. They are recommending that every farm have a sign, a no trespassing sign that it's at least 16 by 20. For every one of them, there's 70,000 people that don't give a hoot. Okay, there's usually very little amount of extremism out there. So those people that are following that comment, they're actually looking for information. The better factual information that you can provide for them, the more people you're actually educating. So I'm not saying that I would encourage conflict on extreme animal rights people, because they have their mindset and they have other goals not to learn. But there's other people that are probably expecting you to educate them. Yeah, and I understand that they still harass us. We have had some issues around here that's unbelievable. But we stand with science. The police force is usually really good at documenting these things and backing you up. If you have a good relationship with your local sheriff's office, that would be awesome too.
We have another question.
Okay, so the one that's saying that from Monica.
It said, in a small ruminant, what international standards can we apply as professionals in the agricultural sector as a guide to preserve the well-being of our animals, farms, and ourselves?
So that's a loaded question, because every country has different standards. I would look at peer-reviewed information or extension information, just because our extension information is based on those peer-reviewed journals or publications. That would be the standard, the science-based standard. In Colombia, it's going to be different than it is here. that it is in other countries. So there's no international standard, and science is going to be our international standards. Good, you know, good comments here. All right, let's move on with Caitlin's talk. Thank you for being patient with us again. I cannot say it enough.
Okay, let me share my screen.
See if this if it's the right one. There we go.
There?
Yeah.
Jonah?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm shifting to a less contentious issue. So thanks, Jonah, for championing the sensitive topics for us. So as Jonah mentioned, I'm Caitlin Bainham, and I'm a extension agent in Marion County. So lots of horses, lots of cattle, but we also have a bunch of sheep and goats as well. So I normally deal in horses and cattle, but I'm gonna wear a little bit of a different hat for you all this afternoon. So we're gonna talk about forage systems. We're definitely gonna cover summer annuals, but I wanted to give you a broader look at forage systems for your small ruminants because there's definitely other times along the year when I think we have opportunity, depending on where you're located, to meet nutritional demands with your pasture. So first, I kind of wanted to touch the value of forage. Generally speaking, it's point blank the cheapest feed that you're ever going to have for your livestock, no matter the species. If you can grow it, it's going to be cheaper than any grain or supplemental feed that you can purchase. In Florida, at least, and I know some of you are tuning in from other areas, we can achieve a full year of grazing if we really put our minds to it. And that's one of the goals of this presentation, is to kind of lay out the framework for how you can develop a year-round grazing strategy for your herd. Forages also help maintain soil structure. So for environmental reasons, this is a good thing. We keep nutrients cycling by keeping roots active in the ground. So keeping some sort of forage grown at all times is key. And then it's also just pretty. It's aesthetically pleasing. I know I much prefer to look over a lush green field than a sandy dry lot. And I just put a note down here before we get started that sheep actually lead all farm animals in their ability to produce marketable products on forage alone. So that is an opportunity statement. So I want everybody to think about that. Goats have their thing too, but sheep are definitely the leading species as far as utilizing forage. And this picture here is from when I went to Ireland, and I actually learned the most about sheep primarily. They have some goats, but mostly sheep, and they are a full forage-based operation for every livestock species because they're an island, and importing any feed doesn't make much economic sense. So, but they're fortunate to be able to grow some very high quality forages over there. So the types of forage that exist, we have browse, which our goats are known to enjoy, which is the leaves or the tips of our shrubs or some woody weed species perhaps. We have forbs, which are broadleaf plants. They're not necessarily grasses, and these can also be some weed species. We have grass, obviously, and grass is known for producing the most biomass annually, and it's usually our most predominant forage. And then we have legumes. These are our high quality forages, and you might know them for their ability to fix nitrogen, which nitrogen is the most limiting nutrient for our forages. So this is an important characteristic. And then when we're talking sheep and goats, they like a variety of different forages. So let me move my little box here. So sheep are grazers. They definitely prefer grass and forbs compared to goats that are known to be browsers, which obviously they like the woody species, leaves off of trees, stuff like that, but they'll also venture into grass and forbs. And then I put this chart here that just very simply breaks it down for you, the diet preference of sheep versus goats. So maybe this is important to note if you have a mix of animals or a mix of livestock, or perhaps you also have some cattle and some horses. A point I wanted to make is that sheep and goats are more selective than other livestock. They can actually, you know, they'll select for nutritious forages, and they can get some good nutrition out of things that our other livestock species wouldn't necessarily select for. So horses are known for being very selective as well, but they're not gonna pick out the weeds in your pasture. They like the young nutritious grass, and that's about it. So sheep and goats can be handy there. There's a physical limitation to sheep and goats on how much they can consume. So just their sheer body size, they can only consume so much forage at one time and process that. And so that's why it's really important to have quality in each bite compared to a species like a cow. A cow has just bigger body size, so they can consume a lot of lower quality forages and make something out of it. But it's important that with every bite, our sheep and goats are getting high quality forage if we want them to meet their production standards on forage alone. So I just gave you, the next couple of slides are going to be basic nutritional demands of a sheep and a goat. This is not a small ruminant nutrition talk by any means. I'm just trying to drive the point home that for certain maintenance classes of animals, we can meet the requirements on the forages that we can grow here, at least in the Southeast United States. So what I'd like to point out, I just got here crude protein and total digestible energy, TDN. And for both sheep and goats, I'm focusing on these maintenance animals, our dry animals, and maybe venturing into this gestation period, even into late gestation. We can kind of maintain those animals on pasture if we put our minds to it again. Once we get into lactation and weaning, sometimes they might need some added energy there that we just can't meet on forage. So this is for goats, and it's a similar story. There's some slight differences, but basically we can meet their needs based on these forages. This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are just some of the forages that are included in this presentation and some of our more common forages. And I've broken them out into color groups. The first two are kind of our base forage, our perennial forage. If you have a pasture growing here in Florida, it's probably Bahia grass or maybe Bermuda grass. The next three forages in the light gray are some of our summer annuals that we're going to talk about. And then the bottom, the green group, is some of our cool season annual forages that we'll talk about and what they have to offer. And you'll see some general characteristics. Generally speaking, our cool season forages are going to be of higher quality than that of our summer annual forages a little bit. But both annual forage groups are going to have more to offer as a baseline than our Bahia grass or Bermuda grass. So the next concept I wanted to touch before I get into talking about perennials and annuals and warm season and cool season is just to give you some definition of what they are if you're not familiar. So warm season plants obviously complete their life cycle. They need warm weather to perform. And then cool season plants obviously thrive in cooler weather, cooler soil temperatures. So in Florida, warm season plants dominate, obviously, because we have extreme heat and humidity and high soil temperatures. So our dominant grass species is going to be a warm season plant. So Bahia grass and Bermuda grass are warm season plants, and Bahia grass and Bermuda grass are also perennial species. So a perennial species is one that comes back every year without needing to be reseeded. So Bahia grass and Bermuda grass, they go dormant in the cool season. They don't die, but they're able to come back from their vegetative material the following spring when it starts to warm up, versus an annual plant. That's a plant that completes its full life cycle in 1 year, and it's going to require you to reseed it each year. So when we get into talking about annuals, just realize that if you're going to work this into your management plan, you're going to need to plant these forages each year because they don't typically reseed themselves. And so once they play out and the weather gets too warm or too cool for them, depending on if it's a warm season annual or a cool season annual, you'll need to replant them. Quality of forage. So I really liked this little graphic by Texas A&M, and it just shows what I talked about a minute ago. Our perennial species are going to be of lesser quality than our annual species. So annual forages, whether it be warm season annuals or cool season annuals, are going to offer more nutrition than our perennial grasses. Our winter annuals are going to be of higher quality than summer annuals, generally speaking. There's a couple of summer annuals that we'll talk about that really are of pretty good quality, but most of our winter grasses and legumes are of higher quality than our summer annuals. And then also your legumes and your broadleaf species are going to have more nutrition in them than our grass species. So this is just, again, a general concept I wanted everybody to be aware of before we move into these specifics. So starting with our pasture base, this is what we tend to depend on the most. So like I said, you probably, if you're in our neck of the woods in Florida, you probably have Bahia grass and you might have Bermuda grass. And this is, again, our warm season perennial. It's what we can depend on year after year, and it's our base. And from there, we can branch out and think about what might work for us beyond that. But a pasture base is going to be dependent on your environment. So if you're not in Florida, if you're in the northern part of the United States, if you're up in, I don't know, Tennessee, Kentucky, your pasture base might change to a cool season perennial. So maybe a cool season plant will dominate because the weather there is different, the climate's different, so your options for your pasture base are going to be different. But here in Florida, we are pretty much, it has to be a warm season perennial. Cool season perennial will not perform here year round. The weather is not conducive. So again, in this picture in the top right-ish, that's also in Ireland, and their perennial pasture base is a perennial ryegrass. We cannot grow perennial ryegrass here in Florida. It's an annual species here. But the weather and the climate is very different in Ireland compared to this bottom picture, which is here in Florida and is a Bahia grass pasture. So when you start to think about what you're going to add to your pasture base, we're thinking of this word diversity. So we're looking to diversify our options because we talked about that pasture base. It has a definitive season, and once the weather changes and it goes into dormancy in the late fall, you need some sort of a plan, or you're going to be feeding hay and supplemental feed unless you can plant some sort of an annual. Same thing in the summer. If you have herd needs that you can meet by planting a summer annual, why not do it? So annuals, these annual plants, we often take advantage of each year to provide that added forage. So there's generally, in my mind, I think of two goals or two reasons why a producer is going to want to plant an annual forage. And it's either to increase your stocking rate, you can, because of the added forage, the added biomass that you're going to get, or the improved quality. So your animals are getting an improved quality than they would get from your perennial grass, or probably from a hay you're going to feed them. So those are kind of the two drivers of planting an annual forage. And so before you just go into deciding you're going to plant an annual, think about what you need from them. What are your specific production objectives, and what are you looking to get from your annuals? Quality, production animals needing that added nutrition. Maybe you really need to increase your quality of forage during one of these seasons, and it would just really behoove you to plant an annual forage. Perhaps you're looking to increase your stocking rate at one season or the other, or you're already overstocked. Maybe you just need that increase in quantity. And with that increase in quantity, you're going to automatically get that quality as well. So think about the time of year that those goals need to be met, and that's going to kind of tell you if you're going to be planting warm season annuals, cool season annuals, or perhaps both. My computer has frozen, but it'll catch up.
Welcome to my world.
CPR.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Jonah's internet bug got into my computer. Okay, so now you've decided that you're going to venture into planting annual forages. So the first question we always get is, what to plant. And that's such a loaded question. First, before we even take a dive into your particular environment and what forage species are better adapted to your soils, etc., I always like to start with kind of these questions. It's going to depend on your needs. So we kind of talked about that. What are your production goals? Why do you need it? Do you need quantity, quality? What's your intended management? These forages, to be economical to you, you cannot just throw them out there and expect them to do well. It's not a cheap process by any means. It might be cheaper than supplying supplemental feed, but it's not cheap. So intend to manage them, but know what level of input you're willing to have. And then we're going to talk about your environment. That's going to be a non-negotiable driver of your options. So next, you're going to assess the situation on your farm. What time period are you looking to graze? That's, there's certain forages that you can plant earlier in one of the seasons or the other. What are your soil conditions? There's certain species of clover that absolutely will not tolerate what we call wet feet. So if you have poorly drained soils, some of those are not going to be a viable option for you. Same goes with some of our summer annual species. Some of them like really dry, well-drained, flatwood soils. So kind of think of the conditions of your soil. Again, how invested are you willing to be? Fertilizer is a big thing. Are you going to be willing to fertilize it? Maybe fertilize it more than once to achieve as much forage as you can from your investment. And then are you going to be willing to move your animals around and employ some grazing management tactics? So this is a slide I love to throw in every forage presentation, and I borrowed it, but this is a really good visual representation. So along the bottom of this little visual is the months of the year, and then I'm going to show you where you can fill in the forage gaps along the year. So this first line is our warm season perennial. This is our Bahia grass, our Bermuda grass. This is what we usually can count on. And so you can see when it's active, it's production period. And then obviously on the front end of this curve and the back end, the quality is not as great as when it's kind of in the middle stage there. So then next, you could stockpile some forage, which we can talk about. That's if you plant an annual or and you save it back in August and then you feed it later in the fall. So you have some forage then. Perhaps you're going to plant some winter annuals. These are the small grains. That's going to cover that time period. Perhaps you're going to plant some ryegrass and clovers, which is also your winter annuals, but they grow a little bit later than our small grains, which is our oat and our rye and our wheat. So that's going to cover that time period. And then perhaps you want some warm season annuals, and warm season annuals tend to overlap our warm season perennial production period, or they do. So here it's useful if you are looking to increase forage quantity, to add more animals perhaps. So this is kind of the overall visual that you should have some sort of goal in your mind to meet this somehow. And maybe on your first try, you just plant one thing, and if you can, if you can close the forage gaps on a couple of months that you wouldn't have otherwise, then I would consider that a success. So first we're going to talk about warm season annuals. And like we just mentioned, it overlaps your pasture base, and your opportunities are to increase your stocking density, increase the quality. You can diversify your forage options. So you can plant a bunch of different things, or it can be a cover crop for grazing if it's an operation outside of what's normally pasture. Sometimes people plant cover crops and then they'll go in and graze their small ruminants. So that's definitely an opportunity. So these are kind of the options. Again, this isn't an exhaustive list, but these are some of the common forages, at least in Florida. If you move out of Florida, even a little still in the southeast, but into Georgia, you get some other options that we don't quite have. Crabgrass, some people think of crabgrass as a weed. It's a weed in a hayfield, but it's a very nutritious warm season annual. Pearl millet. Pearl millet is another fast growing high producer. And then sorghum, Sudan hybrid. You can also plant sorghum by itself. I put with an asterisk the Cercia lespedeza. It's technically a perennial. It really doesn't do that great in Florida. So, but I know it's popular for parasite control due to the tannins that it produces. And it has been shown to reduce parasite loads in goats. but it's, you know, people try it, and I called around today to ask about it, and it's not all that popular here. We have a variety of legumes that you can plant, and remember, these over time will fix nitrogen and put nitrogen back in your pasture system, so that's a ancillary benefit. So cowpea is a really common, pretty easy to grow for summer forage. Soybean and sun hemp are gaining popularity. The thing I would note with them is they have limited regrowth. So when we talk about planting these annuals, you want to get multiple grazing events out of these. And sometimes that's kind of their downfall, because when I show you the quality, or I think I already showed you the quality of sun hemp, it can have really high crude protein and really high TDN, but you might only get maybe one grazing event out of it, maybe two. So, you know, you have to weigh your pros and cons there. Establishment of these warm season annuals. Again, this date is kind of Florida specific, April 1st to June 30th. A little bit later for some. Some people prefer to plant in a staggered pattern. If, you know, you're planting multiple different species, you might plant them at different times to have grazing available at different times. So with that window in mind, I like to remind people it's not set in stone. You need to have some environmental conditions on your side. So you need a soil temperature of at least 65 degrees, and you need some moisture. So depending on the year, we might have a really dry April, and it might not be the best time to plant unless you can irrigate. So you might have to wait a little bit. So it kind of, you know, as with everything in farming, it's a little bit of, you know, wait and see, or a guessing game sometimes. So it's definitely not set in stone, but that's the general window. And then these annuals are going to be most productive June, July, and August. Before you plant, really important that you assess your soil, take a soil test. If you've been to any extension program, we definitely recommend that. Know what your soil has before you start. You might need to alter your pH. You might need to add additional fertilizer than the recommended fertilizer regimen I'm going to tell you about in a minute. See what your weed management concerns might be. Do you need to minimize competition with weeds and existing grass species? Do you need to, you know, put a light herbicide out to minimize your competition? Choose the right forage for your region. So I know the University of Florida puts out publications each year, and we will tell you what's recommended for your area. So before you just pick up some seed at your local farm store, reach out to your extension agents and really let them help guide you so you don't waste your money there. And then the other really important part is to decide how you're going to plant. Ideally, we will, you know, have a prepared seed bed and drill these seeds into the ground, but I understand not everybody has access to that kind of equipment, and you might only be able to broadcast these seeds. But understand there's certain species that are going to do better with being broadcast than some of the others. So again, working with somebody who really knows forages and knows what you're trying to get out of them can help guide you to maybe some alternate options that would work better for you. And then decide how you're going to keep your animals off of that area until it's established. A lot of these, especially the warm season annuals, they'll establish pretty quickly, but it needs to rest for a while before you turn your animals onto it. If it doesn't have a chance to get established, you might think you got bad seed or you didn't prepare properly, but in actuality, your animals have probably just ruined it before it even had a chance to get started. Immediately after planting, you need to fertilize. You can't really get away with no fertilizer. Even with some of the legumes, I know some people say you don't need to add any fertilizer. I would still prefer to put at least 30 pounds of nitrogen out. Half of your soil test recommended potassium and all of the phosphorus. And that's kind of a general recommendation for all annual plantings. So you'll see me repeat that when we talk about cool season forages. And then have a grazing management plan. So grazing management is so important that it got its own slide. So again, in order to make your investment worthwhile, you need to achieve multiple, what I'm going to call grazing events. So you need to pay attention to your stocking rates. the great thing about these annual plants is that it allows you to increase your stocking rate drastically. And sometimes with some of these forages, such as millet, they can get actually quite out of control. And if they get too mature, they lose their quality, they're not as palatable. So you can underutilize as much as you can overutilize. And I think that it's a good conversation to have, especially with small ruminants. Have a plan on how you're gonna utilize these forages. I know some folks that like to do what's called strip grazing, which is where you divide off your pasture with an electric fence and you let them graze a strip at a time, and then you move that fence. That can be an issue actually with a forage like millet, because you'll end up with the other end of that pasture. It'll be way too mature by the time you get there, and that might not be the most economical way of utilizing that annual forage. So consider the amount of forage that should be produced from what you're planting and the amount of animals that you can turn back onto it. Prussic acid concerns, that's a concern with the sorghum and the sorghum Sudan hybrids, not so much in the millet. And so in order to minimize this, you don't want to graze it too short. So I have some grazing guidelines down here. And most of the prussic acid is going to be concentrated in the lower part of the stem. So as long as you're managing their grazing and you're not letting them graze it too short, even though it still might look like there's plenty of biomass left, play it safe and take them off. Never let them graze it down. I think 10 inches is even a little bit too low. I would probably graze it around 12 and then take them off and let it grow back up. But all of these forages, you can see they have different responses to grazing. Your crabgrass behaves like your bahia grass, sort of. You can graze it down to 3 inches. It's pretty tolerant. Something that is important, green makes more green. So your green material is your leaf material, and that's what your animal is deriving its nutrition from, and that's what you want them to be grazing. So if you let them graze a little bit and you take them off, you're going to be constantly in what we call the vegetative period, which is producing more green leafy material. And so you can usually achieve this by the take half, leave half method. So if you consider all of your forage in a pasture, let them graze it down 50% and then take them off. Sometimes we get greedy and we keep them on there too long, but then it's not going to give you as many grazing events as you could have had if you were a little less greedy the first time. Okay, so now we're going to move into cool season annuals. This, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, especially in Florida, because we talked about our base being that warm season perennial. And if we think back to that timeline I showed you a few slides back, our warm season perennial pasture base starts to decline in the fall, which is the time when we would be planting our cool season annuals. So we have a great opportunity to cover a forage gap that's going to exist for us naturally. So this really is intended to complement your pasture base. So as your pasture base goes dormant, now you fall back on these annuals, which are not only going to provide quantity and give you the biomass, but they're going to be of that really high quality forage that we already talked about. So your opportunities is to close that forage gap. It's very high quality to meet nutritional demands. It's going to keep your soil active. So again, this is important almost more so than in the warm season when you have that pasture base actively growing. Now we don't. So now everything is dormant. So it's very important to keep that soil active and keep nutrients cycling in the cool season, which you can do with cool season annuals. And again, it's a lot prettier to see a green field in the dead of winter than a brown dormant field, in my opinion. So these are your options in the cool season. I broke them out by forage type. So if you hear people refer to small grains, these are the forages that produce a grain. So oat, rye, which this is cereal rye. It is different than ryegrass. A lot of people use them interchangeably, but they're actually very different. Wheat, and then triticale, which is a rye and a wheat cross. Legumes are very popular. You have a much broader list of clovers that you can use in the cool season. But the thing with the clovers is to pay attention to your soil conditions. For instance, white clover and ball clover are very conducive for wetter soil conditions, whereas the red clover and arrowleaf clover will not tolerate wet soils. So don't waste your time buying clovers that will not fit your environment. winter pea and vetch are other legumes. Ryegrass is very popular. It's probably the only thing on this list, actually it is the only thing on this list that you can be pretty successful with just broadcast planting it. Everything else on this list, the small grains, the legumes, and most of the brassicas are gonna perform much better if you drill them into the ground, because they really need that seed soil contact. But ryegrass tends to do all right being broadcast. So for ease of planting, this is usually a good option. And then you have your brassicas, which are really popular for goats, and then also deer. Wildlife really like the brassicas. So your establishment of cool season annuals, your planting window, and again, this is pretty Florida specific, and even within Florida, this planting window needs to be adjusted, because I'm in Central Florida, and I typically would plant in November sometime. But if I'm in South Florida, it might be December before I get my cool season annuals in the ground, just because it stays warmer that much longer. So it can really be variable. So it's dependent on your region, but October to December, somewhere in that window is when we're planting these annuals. Very dependent on moisture. We can be known to have a dry October. So I like to tell people, if it's gonna be dry, don't waste your money trying to put the forages in the ground. Just wait on some rain. It's okay. I'd rather establish them a little bit later and still have some forage than rush and establish them within this tight window and then get no rain and have poor germination rate. So the same goes before planting as with the summer annuals. Make sure you select the right forages for you. It's pretty variable even in the state of Florida, and we have publications to guide you so you don't make the wrong choice. So we are here for you. Again, you can refer to that same soil test to kind of know what your situation is. Consider your competition, and this isn't just with other weeds, it's with your perennial grass. If you had Bahia, and it's not unlikely in Florida for Bahia grass to still be actively growing in October or November. So if you're trying to broadcast your ryegrass seeds out into that Bahia grass, it's going to have a really hard time out competing that Bahia grass. So you might, again, if we have a very warm fall, that's going to push your planting date back probably towards December, because you need that first frost, you need some cool weather to knock back our perennial species in order for you to be successful. And again, how are you going to plant, and will this work? There's some species, all of them besides ryegrass, that I probably wouldn't recommend you just take some seed and throw them out there and expect to have a decent return on that investment. So try to coordinate your planting plan for your animals. Again, fence them off, put them somewhere during that establishment window if you can. And then same goes for fertilization. I would like to put 30 pounds of nitrogen out and half of your soil test recommended potassium and all the phosphorus, and manage your grazing to, again, achieve multiple grazing events. I'm going too fast for my computer. It's lagging along, but it'll switch. Okay, grazing management. Again, a lot of these concepts are the same as what we just talked about. We want to graze them multiple times. So, if you decide to plant something like oat and it grows up, you let all your animals onto it and they graze it down to the ground, the chances of that oat coming back nice and healthy for a second grazing event is very slim, and it probably didn't make economic sense for you to plant it if you were only going to let them eat it one time. So our cool season annuals typically take a little bit longer to establish than our warm season annuals. So anywhere from 60 to 120 days after you plant them. And then the order of grow, our brassicas, so your turnip, rape, chicory, all grains are going to come in first, followed by your ryegrass and your clovers. And this can work out really nice when you think about covering that cool season forage gap we have. I really like to recommend, if you're going to invest in planting cool season forages, you might as well plant a variety so you can cover more of that forage gap. So you might as well select a brassica or a small grain and definitely plant a ryegrass. So as soon as that small grain or those brassicas start to play out and they get grazed out, then your ryegrass starts to come in. And your ryegrass should complement your warm season perennial grasses pretty well. So when that ryegrass is done, your Bahia grass should be ready to come back in, or you're ready to plant a warm season annual, whatever you decide. So think of that order of grow when you're thinking about what to select for your particular forage system and how you might be able to complement different species together. Again, stocking rates. You can usually, with annuals, anywhere from double to triple your stocking rate, depending on how your stand came up, what you planted. But it's sometimes, if it's your first time doing it and every year is variable, you don't want to have all of those animals and plan to triple your stocking rate and then one of your forages not come up because you're going to be in a bind. Definitely allow all of these cool season plants to reach 8 to 12 inches before you graze them. That's when you'll know they're kind of ready. And then you don't graze any of these below 3 inches. And again, take half, leave half. It's ultimately better for the plant and the animal. I didn't touch on it too much with the warm season annuals, but another concept that's going to span across both of them when we're talking about parasite management in our small ruminants, most parasite eggs are going to be in the first 2 inches from the ground on that forage. So when we can keep them eating forage that's higher off the ground and we don't let them graze it down to the ground, we're really going to be helping ourselves out as far as the overall picture of parasite management. Taller growing grass, less chance that they're going to be ingesting those parasite eggs. So it is better for the plant because you're allowing it to stay in that vegetative state and regrow the leafy material that's so nutritious anyways. But it's also, from a parasite management standpoint, definitely better for your animal. So grazing management, almost #1 priority in my book. Okay, and then managing some potential issues, and these are all issues that I've run into in doing demonstration plots or planting my own forages. So I would much prefer you guys learn from me and on my dime than turning around and trying to do this for the first time and running into these issues that I could have warned you about. So we talked about competition a little bit. In regards to cool season forages, don't plant too early. We talked about your pressure of that Bahia grass still being very active. In the warmer weather, with that, you still have your weeds being very active, and you increase your disease pressure on those cool season forages when you plant them too early. Prepare your seed bed if you can. If you don't have access to a disc, if you can at least mow it really, really short. The only time I would recommend you really graze to the ground is before you plant an annual plant. So either mow it short, graze it short, put some light herbicide out, something to minimize that competition. If you're planting a legume, so for instance, clovers, but there's many other legumes, particularly warm season legumes, inoculation is really important. A lot of times you can buy pre-inoculated seed, meaning it comes with the bacteria that it needs in order to fix nitrogen, which is one of the benefits that you probably think you're getting when you're planting a legume, but if it's not inoculated properly, it will not do that for you. So often you can buy what's called pre-inoculated seeds. So they've already coated those seeds with the proper bacteria, but you need to make sure that that seed was stored properly and there's a shelf life. So if it's getting wet or being out in the weather, or you don't know how it was stored, if it was stored in the heat and it gets too hot, that inoculant is now null and void and it's not going to do you any good. So make sure you know where that seed is coming from and how it was stored. Other times you might need to buy your own inoculant, and I might even recommend it from time to time, so you can be sure that that bacteria is being incorporated properly. So make sure you choose the right one, because there's different bacteria, different inoculants that need to be included with different forages. And again, we have publications to guide you there. reach out to us. We can help you. Depending on what you select to plant, you definitely want to choose the correct inoculant. And then just buy quality seed. This is not a cheap process. It doesn't have to be an overly expensive process either, but don't buy the cheapest seed that you can find. You want to buy quality seed that's number one, recommended for your growing conditions, and you want to buy certified seed. So certified seed is going to mean that it's been germ tested, and it's going to have a weed seed contamination rate. You don't want to buy something that you don't know where it came from, and you quite possibly might be introducing more problems into your pasture than you bargained for. So don't just buy a brown bag of seed that your neighbor gave you and he says it's going to do great. Look for a seed tag that says it's certified. And we have a publication every year that gets updated for cool season forages, and it's the variety recommendations for the state of Florida. And it is an awesome publication that if you're in Florida, it can help guide you, depending if you live in the Panhandle, Central Florida, or South Florida, different forages that are going to perform best for you. So in summary, forage can definitely meet the nutritional demands at certain times for maintenance animals, maybe even other phases of production in your small ruminants throughout many times of the year. And it's the cheapest way that we can feed them. So if we can do it, we might as well consider it. Think about your environment and your operation objectives, your goals, and let that drive you on what you're going to decide to plant. If you're going to incorporate annuals at all, if you're going to incorporate them in the summer, in the winter, or both, there's an opportunity there for all of those. So determine what's right for you. Select that forage system that's going to work for you and be manageable. Don't just buy seed and hope to put it out the next day. Planning is worth every minute it takes to do it. So prepare for your planting, work with your extension agent or your local resources. Talk to somebody who's done it before. Learn before you try to do it for the first time. That's going to ensure you're successful. And then once it's been planted and you've fertilized it, managing grazing is a completely controllable variable. So you can control how quick your animals are going to graze down that pasture, and you can control how many times you want them to be able to go back and graze that material by keeping it in that vegetative state. So remember that green material is going to make more green material, and that's what we want through the end of the life cycle of that plant. So I think that's all I have, and I'm not sure if there's any questions, but I will take them if there are.
We got one here. Nope, this just congratulating you with your fantastic talk. Thank you for your feedback.
All righty. Well, I hope that that was helpful, and maybe it was a lot of information. I know it was a lot of information, and there's some things, some concepts that I didn't touch on a whole lot. So if you're interested in building a forage plan, reach out to us. Let us help you. That's our job, to guide you and steer you in the right direction. And we like to do that. So please reach out.
If you're in Florida.
Yes, in Florida. If not, it's a different ball game, but we might be able to point you in the direction of your resources.
Yep. Thank you, Caitlin. All righty. We're at the end of our program. I don't know how we've done it today, but we are on time. After my internet went away, I thought we were not going to make it. Anyway, so I just wanted to remind you real quick about the evaluation. I posted it on the chat, and I'm trying to get my computer to share my screen again. Very important for us to have your feedback. There's some comments, excellent comments made today in the chat box. I would love to have those reflected in the evaluation if possible. If you've done the evaluation with all these practice changes that you're about to do or whatever, you're not obligated to fill it out again, but just those comments and those ideas that probably you have today, on future programs. That's what I want. That's what we need right now from you. I just want to remind you about our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Um, so just look at them, subscribe to them. So the way YouTube works is that the more people you have subscribed, the more powers you get, basically, in order to do better marketing and more videos. So if what you're seeing is what you're needing, or if you want to get more information on pasture management and other topics, there's information there, a lot of information there, especially with our website that you just Google search for it. Anyway, because I didn't put the address here. Thank you again to our speakers, our moderator.
There are some questions on the chat.
Okay, go ahead. Go through the question, Francisco.
Okay, let me go to the last one because it's the first one that I see here. Do we need to ask our own county agent, or do you all specialize in different things? That is a great question.
Yeah, I would start with your local county extension agent. We don't have a livestock agent in every county in Florida. But I do get calls or referrals from other extension agents that we collaborate with to provide you with the information that you need. So we all kind of know each other. If there's a question that they cannot answer and that we can, then they will contact us. What else do we
There is
got?
another question about pigeon peas for the goats and sheep.
I did address that one privately.
All right. Does UF have contacts for folks raising cracker sheep specifically?
Yeah, I also privately addressed them. Meat Sheep Alliance has at least 2 major cracker sheep owners in Caitlin's County that I know of, and they would be the people for that. I know that the university has used to have a flock. I don't know what happened to them. I think they got eaten by a coyote or something, but there's a lot of people through the Meat Sheep Alliance.
And we have another question. If we are going to share, I think that is the presentation, and it's going to be available on Facebook and in our CFLAG webpage.
Yeah, I was answering questions on while Caitlin was talking. Yeah, so we discussed that. So
that's
Monica,
that I wasn't paying attention. That's what you want to say.
Yeah, you're not paying attention.
Okay, thank you.
I'm used to it. So Monica is asking about forage conservation techniques that would be as a strategy for seasons where forage production is most difficult. Because you're in Colombia, Monica, I would have that conversation with your local experts. The ecosystem is totally different in different places. And a lot of those conservation practices, I know Francisco could address this even further. They are designed and evaluated on the ground, on a specific ecological system.
I have a friend in Colombia that he worked from Tolima University, Universidad de Tolima, and maybe you can send him try to find him online. His name is Felix Augusto Moreno. I shall be there in October, but all this happened, so probably that is not going to happen now. I'm not sure. So try to reach him because he's he's a professor in the Universidad of Tolima, so probably he can address that type of question.
Remember that you can email us through the Eventbrite page or personal emails that we have been sharing throughout our program. If you have other questions, I am still sharing my screen and I apologize for that. Anyway,
No.
so, okay, never mind. Thank you again for your patience. Thank you for attending this program. I am so grateful that we could have it. I was about to have a heart attack today, but we got it under control thanks to our awesome team. So I hope to see you guys tomorrow then. All right. Have a good night or evening.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Jonah. Thank you, everybody.